Good morning, YouTube. My name is Yusuf and I'm making a weather video about the current trends. So, why am I making this video? Because I'm already seeing this here, over here is a 10 millibar section of the atmosphere. This is the polar vortex, and I'm seeing a trend developing. So when we look at it, first of all, the polar vortex is supposed to be circular and over the coldest part of the poles. If we look at the South Pole, for example, it is a nice circular shape, and it is of course over the Arctic, but not in the Northern Hemisphere. And this concerns us, all the people living in the Northern Hemisphere, because this could have an impact on the weather. In fact, it already has. Why? Because the jet stream has a tendency to follow the polar vortex. So over the United States, we are already seeing a trend. It dips much more southwards than it should be, and its wavy pattern is disappearing. Its amplitude becomes bigger, and thus we have, like here for example, we have these elongated jet stream patterns. The jet stream goes where it shouldn't be, way too much north over Greenland, and then it dips almost to the equator. This is not supposed to happen. It is supposed to be a wavy pattern over here, which circulates around the mid-latitudes, because it is supposed to follow the polar vortex, which is itself supposed to be over the Arctic, and much smaller, compact in size and circular. So we have this erratic shape, and this will create, of course, extreme temperature differences as we go into winter, because it will become colder. Now, of course, we are only in the month of November, so its effects are not really pronounced, but this could change. But the trend is there, and typically when you have this, something like this, and afterwards, because the real danger, and I will come to that later, is of course a sudden stratospheric warming at the end of December and in the month of January. Typically this can cause the polar vortex to completely split into halves, and this would be disastrous. If we look at the temperature, the actual temperatures and the forecast, this is Climate Reanalyzer, and I'm using the temperature map, but let's check out the temperature anomaly. This is actually easier to see what's happening. We already see this trend like I showed just now. So because of the jet stream going much more southwards, cold from the Arctic goes to the mid-latitudes, and warm air from over here, this side, pushes to the Arctic. If I move the slider, this becomes apparent, you see, over here, and the cold over here, and this typical pattern is persisting. It's going to persist. This forecast actually tells that it will change at the end or beginning of next week. But keep in mind, this is a forecast, and typically what's the accuracy only goes to half of the forecast, and I'm talking from experience, because typically these simulations don't take into account what I'm showing you now. So in my opinion, if this doesn't change, you would see this pattern that you will see now. This over here will persist, and in Europe we will have a little bit of strengthening of these easterly, so-called dry air from Siberia, from Russia, trying to push into Europe. Right now they are blocked by this positive Arctic oscillation, so this is good news for us Europeans, but this could also change. As you can see, we have these these are called westerlies. This is warm moist air from the Atlantic. Typically it protects Europe from this cold dry air which comes from Russia. So what could change and make these stronger, and also this much more extreme? Well, of course, a negative Arctic oscillation, and typically this happens after a sudden stratospheric warming. Right now, conditions are favorable for a positive Arctic oscillation, and I hope it stays this way. The only little bit of a positive geopotential anomaly is around this section of the atmosphere, but this is negligible. I think as we move to December, we will have mostly a positive oscillation. Let's hope so, at least. So what I want to know is the danger, which is actually the most important factor in wintertime. This is whether or not we get a sudden stratospheric warming. And I'm going back to 2010, I believe. You know what? Let's go to 2009. Yes, in 2009, this is actually a very good example. We were actually at solar minimum, or just exiting solar minimum. And as you can see, typically, because we have now La Nina conditions in solar minimum, this is actually conducive for very strong sudden stratospheric warmings. This, I remember in 2010, I believe, the cold was so severe, in 2009, that people actually died. We did have 3 consecutive cold waves, and it went to, in some parts of Europe, to minus 30 degrees. This was very cold air from Russia, which was pushed. So these strong easterlies and westerlies became very weak. So I'm guessing that around this period, the polar vortex split in two. I believe it was in 2008 or in 2009. I'm not really sure. But we did have an episode of very cold winters over Europe, and it was all over the news. So let's hope this doesn't happen. But how do you recognize whether or not we will have this? Well, let's go back to the current numbers of 2022. If you see actually a sudden spike in the 10 millibar section or in the 1 millibar section, then you know we have a sudden stratospheric warming. You will also see it in the geopotential anomaly height and temperature. You can find these in stratospheric troposphere monitoring. You have the temperature anomaly. Let's look at it now. Looks normal. So typically when you have a sudden stratospheric warming, this would all be in the red, all the way from the top of the atmosphere to the lowest sections of the atmosphere, and this would indicate that warm air is actually pouring in very quickly. But let's hope this does not happen this year. What we do want to have is, of course, a very strong Arctic oscillation and a polar vortex which is located where it should be, more or less over the Arctic, compact and very strong. This would warm actually the mid-latitudes and create good, mild winter condition. But right now things don't look so good, because typically this is an omen of much worse things to come. When the polar vortex already starts to act erratically before winter, this is a warning sign. But again, time will tell. And this is only to show you the current trend. So we are protected by positive Arctic oscillation, but the polar vortex is not where it should be, and this is a reason for concern. And we are, let's not forget, in the current, this is actually a summary of La Nina conditions. So actually this is the ENSO report. This is about El Nino and La Nina. And if I go actually, yes, the Nino index, we can see we are in negative territory. This means La Nina. And these conditions will continue until summer. They are predicted to continue until summer of next year. So we're not going out of this anytime soon. So the chances of having a cold winter, and so all the ingredients are there. We are exiting solar minima. We have an erratic polar vortex. The only good thing is actually the Arctic oscillation. This means that this polar vortex is actually strong. This is a good thing, because if it was weak on top of all that, this would be very bad. But again, it's too early to say for sure what will happen. But now you know actually what to look at to know if winter is going to be cold or mild. My personal prediction is we could see a major stratospheric warming developing next year, the beginning of next year, and this could actually split the polar vortex in two and create a very cold winter over Europe and the United States. But let's hope this is not going to be the case. Let's hope that this recovers. and that we will have actually a positive Arctic oscillation all the way, because warm weather is always better, especially for Ukrainian people which are having hardship, especially in the just liberated towns. This would be very bad for them, as Russia targeted their infrastructure, and so it will be for them very difficult in terms of heating and so on. I mean, the last thing they need is a cold wave coming, so let's hope this does not happen for the sake of Ukrainians. So we are at the end of the video, and I will cite a philosophical quote. I believe it's number 70. He does not think too much of himself, is much more esteemed than he imagines. This means when you are humble, you get a much better image towards people than you think. Because typically people hate arrogant people, but humble people are very liked. So that's what it means. So if you do not think much of yourself, that's a good sign, apparently. This is the end of the video. Thanks for watching. If there are major developments in the weather, I will make a new video. Otherwise, I will actually wait and see, especially at the end of December, to give you my new forecast. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you around.